body was so tight, like so tight. It was just terrible. I didn't feel I can really like push the ground, and when I really did, it just didn't feel right. It felt like my knees went into the wrong way or whatever. I didn't feel strong at all.
But like, how much mobility work would you do? Like
Yeah,
rolling, stretching, stuff like that?
Yeah, like a lot. Also, a lot. So I think it made things even worse. I had 3 days to try to do the simple exercises you told me, and I felt amazing. Like literally, I felt stronger. I felt grounded. I felt exactly what I tried to find out these last 3 years through just walking. Simple way, I just feel really calm.
I'm very excited to share with you Jakob's case study today because it is going to be a very relatable case for many people. And also it is a case that involves someone totally from head to toe. We had to work on his whole body in order to get him feeling and moving better. Jakob is a personal trainer and massage therapist, and he was kind of looking to put the pieces together for himself by working with me in person while he took my course. So at the point he came to see me, we were about 2/3 of the way through the course, and he hadn't really done a whole lot of work on himself because he knew he was coming to see me. So this was his first opportunity to really put everything together. He had some muscular imbalances and he never really felt quite right within his body. He didn't feel very grounded. He felt very unstable when he was standing or doing anything dynamic, and it felt like things were just twisted within his body. And particularly the biggest complaint that he had was that his foot felt very dysfunctional. Particularly his right foot did not feel like it was very connected with the ground, and it was throwing the rest of his body off. So when I took a look at his posture and we did his initial assessment, it was a very interesting presentation that he had at his foot. Typically when the back of the foot is collapsed down like this, typically what you see is the forefoot is kind of out and the toes are splayed outwards like this. They move into abduction because the whole foot collapses into a certain extent. But what we saw with him was actually the back of the foot, yes, was collapsing down like this, but the front of the foot was almost like it was moving into what we call adduction, like that. So it was this weird twisted foot like this. Now this was providing him a very unstable place to work from when he was trying to connect his foot to the floor and move through the gait cycle and be able to really effectively shift and lateralize to one side of his body and be able to shift into one side, in that side, out of the other side, which is ultimately the goal of my methodology. Now both of his feet looked like this to a certain extent, but his right foot looked even more twisted into that presentation than the other one, and that was really limiting his ability to move into either pronation or supination effectively, but especially that pronation on the right side. Now his visual posture was really interesting because when you look at him from a right-facing view, a right profile view, it looked like his pelvis was turned to the left side, which is very interesting when you consider the assessments I will talk about in a second. Now this is where it gets really interesting because when I assessed Jakob's passive table tests, meaning that I assessed his rotational capabilities to one side or the other, he was clearly better at turning to the right side even within his rotation of his pelvis, yet when he stood up, his pelvis was facing the left side. So how is that possible? Now here's where it can get really interesting. There's a difference between being turned towards one side and having a rotational bias and being better able to shift to a given side versus totally being grounded on that side. Now, most people under normal circumstances, typically on the side that they're turned towards and can load more, they're gonna be more grounded on that side. But Jakob, based off of my testing, could turn better to the right side in his body, especially at his head, his rib cage, and his pelvis, yet he was more grounded on his left foot because his left foot was not as dysfunctional as his right. Of course, both were dysfunctional, but the right one was significantly more so, and that was his biggest problem that he had. His biggest complaint was that his right foot gave him a lot of issues. Now what we did was we first worked on that right foot's ability to connect to the ground better. We did specific drills that helped his ability to pronate that right foot. But on the left side, what we did was we worked on his ability to supinate his left foot. The supination of the left foot and the pronation of the right foot, this is my right hand, this is my left hand, will allow him to push and better lateralize and shift and load his left hip, create a better ability to load the left side of his body. Yet, remember that that right foot is not as grounded as the left. So my game plan was that I needed to get him to better turn towards the left, but better be able to sense the ground underneath his right side eventually at some point. Now, if you know anything about my content, all the exercises that I do have some sort of total body integration from head to toe. Now, that means that there's a head component, a rib cage component, a pelvis component, and a foot component, especially if a foot is pushing into a wall or some sort of object. But if a foot can't push into a wall effectively or some sort of external object, to teach the foot to do certain things when the rest of the body is doing certain things, then the whole exercise is a waste of time because the foot won't be able to match the action that's happening everywhere else. So I needed to get those feet more functional if I was going to connect them with the rest of the body in more integrated exercises. So we taught the right foot how to better pronate and the left foot initially how to better supinate. Now, Jakob's not very good, remember, at going into either side of his body for different reasons. But we needed to first get him to better turn to the left side and get better over that left foot and use his right foot to push into the ground more effectively to do that. But he also needs to learn how to get heavy on his left side and be able to turn better to the left. Now, because Jakob is a quick learner, we immediately then went into an exercise where we were integrating the mechanics of pushing out of his right side and using his right hip external rotators at the same time as loading his left hip internal rotators as he turns his pelvis to the left side, feeling the pressure of his foot on the left pushing against something. So you can see how this is creating a position of his body where he's kind of like this. Left shoulder lower, left hip higher, and that right leg is extended because that's him pushing out of his right side. Now, this was a very effective strategy, and this got his table test looking really, really good. And we needed to train him here for a while before we could then do our ultimate goal of getting him to effectively shift in and out of both sides, which would mean that we would need to train his right side in this exercise too, but he wasn't ready for it quite yet. Because when we did this on his right side, his table test actually got worse, meaning that he is not able to properly get out of his left side and into his right side quite yet. An asymmetrical body requires an asymmetrical approach, so we needed to do more work getting him back over, turning to the left more effectively first. And after doing those exercises, look at what happened to his posture. We turned him more left technically, yet his posture evened out on both sides. How is it possible that we turned an already turned left pelvis to the left more, and now he's more even on both sides? It's fascinating, right? Well, it's because we better got the ground underneath his left side. He wasn't compensatorily turned to the left anymore. He didn't have a reason to compensate into the left. He was more balanced and more grounded underneath both feet, so his body could become more stacked. It can be challenging to know which area of the body is the biggest limitation and how you need to sequence certain exercises to get the best results. That's exactly what my biomechanics course is going to be able to teach you. If you're interested in learning more, I currently have a really great flash sale going on right now, and it is only available for a limited amount of time, just a couple more days, depending on when you're watching this, maybe only a couple more hours. Now remember, Jakob was also once upon a time a very strong, very fit individual. He's not far off from it now, but he did have some regression because of the pain that he was experiencing. So we started to get him in the weight room doing basic lifts where he was able to create, and this is always my initial goal, a better ability to just stack the head over the ribs, over the hips, and just be able to do that and load ourselves in that position effectively. So you're seeing a couple of exercises come up here which are really good for that, but I really want to focus on what's going on within the foot itself. Because remember, his foot was not very good at moving into pronation or supination. So what we needed to do was create a bias of certain wedges and in certain exercises so that way he can better shift into his left hip into more of a supinated high arch position on his left and a more pronated position on his right side. There's specific wedge setups we use in order to bias that. We did more overall activities on the left where the foot was in a supinated position with that wedge setup, trying to drive a turn to the left. And on the right side, we did more things where we're trying to push out of the right side. Now remember, the goal of my methodology, as I talk about within my course, is to better effectively shift in and out of both sides of the body, not just one. But initially, we did an asymmetrical approach to manage an asymmetrical body. But eventually, if someone is doing a lot of work trying to better shift into their left side, half of the gait cycle on their left side is trying to get out of the left back into the right. So what we needed to do once he got to a certain point within his program is we need to better now train the right side. And doing that same exercise you saw earlier with his left leg down, left side down, and right leg extended, we then did that, but now we did it on the right side. And we know we're ready to do this once he can do that on his right side. And his assessments on the table and within his movement itself improve objectively. Once you see those things improve on both sides, that means that he's probably ready to train that side. If he's not improving, that means he's not ready to do that quite yet. And so there's different little markers for that, but that's kind of the simplified version of it. And on his last day, he walked out of here with exercises for both sides, pronation and supination work on both sides, training that side lying abduct and shift exercise, as we call it, on both sides. And now he's better able to move in and out of each hip. And his posture has objectively significantly improved. He is pain-free and he's doing amazing. And I'm very proud of Jacob. He was a pleasure to work with, and I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. If you want to learn more, subscribe, look out for more of these case study videos. Let me know you want more case study videos, and also check out that deal on the course that expires soon.